Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rebecca and on this channel I'll go through all things accounting, finance, Excel and investment related. So if you do like this kind of stuff then please do consider subscribing, and otherwise let's jump straight into the video. So in today's video I'm going to go through a few tips on things that I would tell myself if I could go back in time to the very start of my accounting and finance career. So I've been doing accounting and finance as a career for over a decade now. So I am AAT qualified, I'm ACA qualified, I've worked in practice and I've worked in industry, and I've worked with many students in the process, and obviously was a student at some point myself. So a lot of these tips will be quite useful to you if you're currently studying at university, college, or if you're in your very first job in accounting and finance, or if you've had a career change and you're now working in that industry. So tip number one would be that Circa, when I first started out again, I was working in practice and it was really my first office job, so I hadn't really worked in an office environment as such before that point. So I had done call centre work, but it's really not the same thing at all. And what I found was happening early on, and I understand the reason why now, but at the time I was being given tasks by my manager on a daily basis which would change. So one day I'd be working on a certain client's books and the next day I'd be working on a different client altogether, doing a different task, working on different sections, etc. And I'd be given a list of instructions to do, and in some cases instructions weren't very clear. Or I'd be given an email of some kind, and then my manager would, fly off on phone calls, visiting clients, having client meetings, basically just were not available a lot of the time, and there wasn't really anybody else to really speak to in those moments to ask for additional help or for those notes to be clarified. And sometimes I didn't really want to ask either, because I felt like that made me a little bit stupid, like I couldn't understand the task I was being given when others could do that before me. So I didn't want to come off as stupid. I wanted to come off that I knew exactly what I was doing and I was trying hard and I wanted to learn, etc. But that meant then that I spent a lot of my time reverse engineering a lot of what was done in the prior year to gain an understanding of what was being done. And in some cases I could ask the individual who had done that before if they were available again, which was fine. So I'd go through all of these tasks and get them all done and present them to the manager was happy, etc. But where this falls down is that you're not really gaining an understanding then of why you're doing what you're doing. So not only is it hard for you to reverse engineer something and gain an understanding of where things are being posted, etc., but you don't understand in some cases why you're doing that. And it's really that which is going to enhance your skills in accounting and finance. So that skill and understanding of why you're doing something means that you can then corroborate that with your studies. So what I'd say is, if anyone is in a similar situation and you're shy and you don't necessarily want to ask, or your manager's not available, find somebody else, or send an email to your manager asking for some time the next day or whenever they are available to really go through that why. So if you're being given a task, make sure that not only is there a methodology, so how you are to do that task. So step one, review a load of invoices and check for prepayments at the year end, review a load of invoices and check for any accruals, etc. And then here are your next steps. But also make sure that that task, whatever it might be, also has an objective attached to that. So you want an objective, so the why you're doing what you're doing. Why do we want to do this? What impact does this have on the financial statements? Methodology, how you're going to do that task. And then conclusion, so what have you concluded from the information that you have found? And if you keep those in mind throughout your studies and throughout your career, then you will learn a whole lot more than just an individual who's going through producing those tasks. So my second tip would be, whenever you're doing a job, so imagine that you are preparing a set of accounts again for a client and you've got all of your working papers there, so whether that be in electronic form or actual paper form like it was back in my day, then you've got last year's file to go back to and you've got this year's file. And as you're going through, your manager will have told you, you need to concentrate maybe again on the bank reconciliation, prepayments, then accruals and trade creditors and trade debtors, etc. But when I was first starting out, I would go ahead and take those particular tasks as far as was possible. And then right at the very end of doing all of those tasks, I'd then present my manager with a list of questions. And at the time, obviously having never worked in accounting and finance before, I thought that was the best thing to do because I was clarifying a list of all of those things all at once with the manager. But the problem was that because the manager wasn't necessarily available at the point in time when I could have presented those items, or I didn't want to present them all individually to save them time, it meant that the job was then at a standstill. So I had these list of outstanding questions with no resolution and still the accounts to prepare. So what I'd say is that if you're being given a certain task to do or an entire set of financial statements to do, then as you're going through, ask those questions. So send an email off, or send a phone call, send a text, whatever it might be, or speak to your manager if they are in the office, or somebody else who's an assistant to that manager who might be able to help. Because if you just spend those quick 5 minutes going through a query that you've got, it's better to do it there and then so that you can move forward with the accounts preparation than it is to present your manager with a list of questions, because then it's going to take time to go through all of that, update the financial statements, which might take another day or 2 days. Whereas if you get that resolved there and then, you can then move forward onto the next task. Now, my third tip would be to make sure that you are networking. And what I mean by that is not networking outside of the office. I mean networking within your firm, within your business. So whether you work in practice or in industry, it doesn't matter. What you want to be doing is not just building up relationships with individuals who work in the finance section, so not just individuals who work in audit or tax, etc., or just within the business units. You want to be making sure that you're building up good relationships with individuals from different departments. So if you're working in practice, make sure that you're building up good relationships with individuals from tax, because at some point you're going to need them when you're preparing your financial statements. You also want to make sure that you build up good relationships with individuals from, say, planning. So individuals that you won't necessarily work with on a day-to-day basis, but that you will cooperate with later down the line. Because if you're building up those relationships early, then if you need information from them and vice versa, it just makes that process a little bit easier, and they might be more willing to work with you and obtain that information quicker during busy periods if you do have that relationship already built. And it works the same way again in industry. So if you've got a good relationship with individuals from procurement, then if you've got any queries on purchase orders or purchase invoices, payments, terms, etc., or if you need information about a particular supplier or the supply chain, then those individuals are going to be wanting to help you a little bit more if there is that relationship already built. And I don't think that's something that I necessarily considered early on, but as time has progressed, I'd say around 5 years into doing accounting and finance as a career, that I realised that it made all the difference to have those relationships built up with those other departments. So I'd say it's definitely something that you want to be doing if you're not already doing so. So introduce yourself to them, make sure that they know who you are, make sure that they know what you do. And they'll be so grateful if they have that individual who works in finance that they can go to with any questions. So it does work both ways. So if you build those good relationships with the likes of procurement, etc., and you gain an understanding of what that department does, then it makes it easier for you to get hold of the individual within their department, or they might point you in the right direction of that individual or introduce you to them. Then it just makes that a lot easier to gain that information from them when you do need that in the business. And at some point, I guarantee that you will need to speak to other individuals from other departments to gain information, particularly if you start looking at the more commercial side of a business. So gaining those relationships early on is definitely a win-win from both sides. So I would highly recommend that you start networking within your business if you haven't already done so. So I hope you found this video useful. If you've got any further comments or queries, then pop those in the comments section below. Hit the thumbs up if you liked the video, if you found it useful in any way, shape or form, and consider subscribing, and I shall see you on the next video.